Hi, and welcome back to the Purna Yoga Shala. Now, we're ready to get on the mat, okay? We're ready to get on the mat, and there's a couple things we gotta go over before anyone should ever start a yoga practice. Now, not only should the instructor know what your past injuries are, or you should know how to address them, hopefully through physical therapy or just your own research, but when you start to move in the Purna Yoga Shala and in modern yoga, we should now have the understanding that the modern body is not the same body that was going through the physical cues that are in the ancient practice. Why? When was the ancient practice taught? How was it taught? And by who was it taught? Let's get into all these things before we even discuss why we have to make the changes. We got Buddha sitting here, we got the Om Shada behind us. Let's get started. Okay, so first we gotta make a very keen understanding that before around maybe 130 years ago, the yogasana, the physical practice, was basically only done in ashrams or in, temples and places where priestly castes or men of worship were doing their thing. They were doing their worship, and in this time, the physical asana was basically used for its true understanding. It was to ready the body for a stillness, for such a stillness and a perfect posture that you could sustain a lengthy stint of meditation. So with that being said, once we start to use the physical practice in the more modern sense, we have to know why it was brought into the group context. This is something that I'm going to talk about in the Guru lineage a lot more specifically as the classes progress and the lectures progress, and I hope you'll stick with me throughout them. But for right now, I'll just tell you that it was only about 100 years ago that students were gathered to practice yoga who may not have been lifelong yogic devotees. So this means, devoting yourself to any path, whether it's a monk or a yogi or any kind of, any follower of a true spiritual path. So once it was brought into the group context, it was done so because it was brought to young men. Originally, it was brought to by two young men. So their physical movements and physical patterns throughout the day were very, very different from ours. Very different. From the shoes they wore, to the way they sat, to the way they used the bathroom. Sorry, but it's true. So now that we know that this is who they was being taught to, we can know that a lot of the anatomical cues, the physical cues in the postures, the way the postures are to be performed, they would probably be a lot different because of the patterns, the movement patterns that the physical form has gone through throughout their entire lives. Because they didn't just wake up one day when they started doing yoga and stop wearing shoes or started sitting a certain way. It was throughout their entire lifetime that they had moved a certain way in these patterns, building certain tissues and physical structures that needed healing, needed undoing, so that the restless body could become still and enjoy those stints of meditation. A lot harder for young men to do. So now that we know why and who it was being taught to, why the way it was being taught, now we know that we probably need to adjust if we're to use the same concepts behind the practice. If the physical practice is to teach us to be healing the body and to stilling the body, preparing the body for meditation, then the movements that we're going to have to go through in the modern era are going to have to fit along with patterns of the shoes we wear, the way we sit, and the way we use the bathroom even. So I know it seems silly, but every time I reference that, it comes down to the squatting movement. And this is a lot to do with how the pelvic region and how the sacroiliac joint tilts or hinges. So I know that's a little scientific, and that's okay, because I just want you to basically understand that the hip tucking under or untucking, if you will, is a natural movement in some physical movements as you go through these regimens, I should say. And for others, it would have to be forced in a physical regimen, or it might happen during their lifestyle. So let's discuss this. Every time you squat a certain way, you're trying to hinge only at the hip, not allowing the spine to round, not allowing the head to curve down, and the shoulders to slouch down. You want a strong upper body as the hips hinge back. So when you do this, say in a chair pose. When you do the chair pose, typically we've been taught to tuck the tail under, to scoot the tail under. And this is a big no-no because we're doing that so often just with our natural movement patterns in modern society. Basically by the way you're sitting. You know, you might not be trying to, but naturally it's occurring just by your body's own weight and gravity's compression. Sorry, but it's true. So we're trying to undo these things that were being done on a regular basis every time they were going to sit down, every time they were sitting cross-legged. So that's one of the main postures, the squat being done properly with the hips far back, you know, with the proper tilt of the torso according to that hip hinge, and this depth, of course, is completely up to your physical past and history. This is why you need to do your own research. You need to know your own body and how to move. And hopefully you'll come into the Purna Yoga Shala where when I know of your physical past and your history directly, I can help you adjust accordingly in every single posture, not just the ones I'm going to name now. So the second posture that would be adjusted would be probably the lunge. And I think that lunging position, the most typical position, the warrior one, it needs to be adjusted for the way that the hips move once again. Too often we're tucking the tail under, and it's okay in some movements. But when it's happening, it's only because the fundamental, the biomechanical structure forces it to happen. And then it's perfectly fine. To accentuate it, to force this movement when we don't need to, and it's against the principles of fundamental patterns, then that's when we could be damaging the body or just reinforcing past damage that had already been done, not correcting or healing in any way. So, with that lunge, with that warrior, the warrior one specifically, and I'll get into the warrior two after I break down warrior one. So, with the warrior one, you want the back heel as high up as you can get it, placing the weight in the front leg as much as possible. And I know this is like blasphemy to some people, and if you want to continue the same movement patterns, by all means, go for it, no worries. I'm just trying to incorporate modern physiological movements and anatomical knowledge with my own physical experience and my own injured body and my healing process, so that you can experience the most amount of healing and strength through one of these practices. So again, the weight is in the front leg, the hip is hinging accordingly to that front leg, the depth or the spread of the lunge, it is meaningless. It's all about your physical form. Let's even talk about the forward fold. The forward fold, so commonly done. Well, a lot of the times the forward fold can come down right to the base of the feet. Here we want to talk about the weight distribution. When the weight is too far forward, that natural tucking of the tailbone and rounding of the spine, it becomes prevalent. Not to say it's exaggerated, but when the weight is set further back in the heels, there's a little tension released out of the back of the knees, then the glutes become more active. The hamstrings actually can become longer, and the spine can round only to its own depth that you'll feel it. You kind of feel how it won't let you go any further. Your body will only allow you to go so far with that proper hip hinge. It all comes down to this. Why am I talking about this so much? Well, my back injury changed everything for me. I didn't injure it during yoga, but the way I might have been practicing, not taught, because my teaching in these postures always gave this as with an asterisk. So when you do this, do it this way with these injuries. And then this is the traditional way. So of course, try to do more of the traditional way, not making the adjustments. And when I was injured, it didn't help. It didn't help any that I wasn't moving in these ways. So now we're trying to make the corrective forms now so that you never want to ever have to deal with any low back injuries, any knee injuries, any hip injuries, ankle, right down the line, and of course, right up the spine as well. So let's go back to the sun salutations, because that's pretty much what we're breaking down right now. I'm gonna sneak that in. These are postures that would have to do with the sun salutations. They're done repetitively. So as you're doing them repetitively, if you're doing them incorrectly, you can lead to damage. If you're doing them correctly, you can lead to strength. Hey, look at that. Okay, so now we're down on the mat. the downward facing dog. This is such a overdone posture. It's seen as a lot of bridge postures, and that's okay, but it has to be overdone properly, and then it can be healing. Again, if you're overdoing anything improperly, you know what it'll lead to. So a lot of the times I hear people just stress getting the heels down or stress getting the legs straight. And really, it should be kind of the opposite. It has more to do with the push of the upper body and the lift of the hips. Of course, keeping that correct hip hinge. So that's the downward facing dog, and it works again from the hands and the placement of the weight distribution, being all the way down to the fingertips, making this kind of L with the hand as you push through the mat, all the way up through the shoulders, keeping that long spine, and then at the top of the hips, keeping that lift of the navel so that the low back, and I know it sounds counterintuitive, but by lifting the navel, lifting the belly button, you're going to keep the low back engaged and the proper hip hinge. Then it's, again, soften the back of the knees, and don't you ever worry about getting the heels down. With time, all is coming. With practice, all is coming. All right, the plank. It's a plank. So here's a plank, but basically you can see that the shoulders should be properly aligned over the wrists or thereabouts, never too far back, never too far forward. And again, you want the heels lifted, you want those legs active so that the thighs stay active, and again, the core stays active, protecting the spine and reinforcing, really, everything in that area. Now, the Chaturanga Dandasana, I'm gonna have an entire, I think, series of videos breaking down this posture because I see it done so wrong so many times, and when you make the correction, it can have so many benefits in 1,000 other postures. So eventually we'll get to breaking down Chaturanga Dandasana. Right now I'll just say that the elbows bend back as the shoulders go forward, and you never want to make it a dippy, divey, rolly action. You want to stay away from that. You want it to be very structural, formatted, and very strong. The upward facing dog, it's another one that I'm going to do a whole series of videos on, but basically you want to make sure you're on the tops of the feet and that you don't stress the tucking of the tailbone. Again, that's going to happen in any natural back bend. So what you do forcefully press into the mat, you do keep your pressure there, but there's no real stress or activity as there would be, say, in a downward facing dog, more constantly pushing. This is a posture of more of a release into the posture so long as the thighs are lifted. So the chest can open, the breath can elongate, and you can undo the forward folding movements that you've gone through. Every time we do these postures, I hope this sticks with you. Anytime you do these on any mat in any class, maybe some of these cues will stick with you, keeping the tailbone untucked because it's going to naturally happen as you go through. And not to say you exaggerate either way. I hope I made myself clear there. I don't want, the gluteus maximus sticking way back and saying, you told me to keep my tail untucked, my hips back, and this is what you get. No, you kind of find the middle way there, you split the difference, and you keep it soft in that area so that the surrounding muscles, the glutes can go active, the thighs can go active, the hamstrings can stay strong. Oof, that's a lot to cover, but that's how important it is to me. These are the movements that we repeat at the beginning of the practice, and pretty soon I'm going to come out with a video and we do them repetitively, over and over, cueing them slowly to start, and then you just choose how long you want to play the video for, because I think I might run myself to exhaustion doing it. It's going to be fun. I hope you'll keep up with me. I hope you'll stay with me and join me here on the YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. Comment, of course. I'd love to know what you guys think, and if you have any suggestions for future videos, anything you have questions about that you'd like me to address in these, you can head over to the Instagram, mine, the at the Concrete Yogi, and the schools at Purna Yoga Shala for other content and announcements on classes, workshops, teacher trainings, tours, retreats, all the good stuff. Don't forget to share, put it all over the place that you love the Purna Yoga Shala, and this is the place to learn, because it's where the physical meets the philosophical, and where you're gaining that second layer of yoga knowledge beyond the physical practice, adding to it every time you step onto a yoga mat. I'm not your average yogi. My name is Dominic Napa. Again, thank you so much for joining me. Have a beautiful day. Peace.